Hello, welcome to the Retro Rejects. On this week's episode, we're going to be discussing the masterpiece, the excellence that was Beetlejuice.
Don't say his name.
Beetlejuice. Thundercats. Oh yeah, you picked Beetlejuice for this week's.
Yeah, it's just been ages since I've seen it, and I wanted to see, did it hold up? Was it as good as I remember? Was it worse than I remember? Was it hilarious or what? So, what did you make of it?
Terrible. Piece of shit.
End of podcast.
Yeah. I think it holds up exceptionally well. As well, like what we were saying after we looked at it, because it's that film where it's in the hour and a half sweet spot. I think where most films were an hour and a half, and it was,
or even less. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Whereas nowadays
everything's like 2 hours. I think it's the same thing where it's a gaming as experience in it now, where people are starting to equate value with
the length of something,
which doesn't necessarily, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a 3-hour film if it warrants it.
If it's good, exactly, yeah. If the script calls for it, or if the plot line calls for it.
Yeah, now you're seeing some terrible Marvel movies that are 2.5 hours long just because it's...
Yeah, and I think it's probably just a reaction maybe to... the development of kind of long run series shows, if you know what I mean. They're kind of people are used to binge watching series, so we'll better do it a small mini series, but all in one
thing. It started happening with gaming a while ago, because it was this thing where people, I think some games like say Assassin's Creed and all those were fairly guilty of it, whereas the first couple of Assassin's Creed games were say 6 hours long, 8 hours long maybe, and then I suppose the open world thing started kicking in, and people were like, oh, well, if a game is only and of course they always listen to the idiots, because the idiots are always the most vocal.
Yeah.
Where they're like, well, yeah, I'm not playing it if it's only 4 hours long, that's a waste of my time. Where it's 4 hour long experience that's really good is better than a 30-hour long experience, which is awful.
Tedious and boring and dragged out for no apparent reason. Yeah.
But now it just seems to have infected movies. So it was really nice to go back and to look at a film that was 90 minutes long, and all the 90 minutes something happened. It's just...
It's rollicking along at a decent pace.
It's not like they took a half an hour to kind of just discuss Beetlejuice's motivations or...
Although, funnily enough, was it something like the 50-minute mark that Beetlejuice finally showed up?
Yeah, that was, forgot about that, we kind of made note of that, because, and it got to that 50-minute mark very, very quick.
Felt like it did, but it equally didn't feel dragged out, they're giving a load of backstory or anything like that. That was, not necessary.
You didn't need it,
But they gave just enough backstory, and I think he cares just as much about the shenanigans of the various families involved as he did about when Beetlejuice shows up.
It's because they were just good characters. You didn't need to know all their back. You got enough.
Yeah.
Which is the way most good movies are. You don't need to know fucking
what happened to them when they were 7 and how it developed. They just signal it really loudly. Basically, for anyone who doesn't know, there's a couple own a house, and they're sort of nice kind of run-of-the-mill couple, but they actually end up dying. Their car drives off a bridge.
And even with that, if that was done nowadays, I think it'd be a really gory death. Whereas I forgot how kind of... it was the car plummets maybe 2 foot.
Yeah.
Or what looks,
and
and it's not even fast.
Happen. Yeah. And as well, it is kind of a horror film, so you'd expect it to be a bit horrific.
I think in the original version of it, it was a fairly gory death, but I think they kind of went, no.
They just kind of glossed over, because I suppose it's a little bit more kid-friendly that way as well. But the family that move into the house, you get what you need to know about them with just even the way they're dressed. The kid arrives and she's dressed in over the top goth black dress, and she's I am so depressed and so lonely, oh woe's me, and that's it. You know what kind of a character she is. She's writing poetry and stuff. the mother is just, you know, a wild sort of, you know, wearing all of her mad clothes and all the rest, and she's a fashionista and an artist from like New York, and you know, she's essentially like, she is the same character the whole way through to Schitt's Creek, basically.
But do you know the whole thing with the family that move in, the Dietzes, wasn't it? I remember seeing this when I was younger, and thinking of them as being nearly the villains of the piece.
Yeah.
Whereas when you look at it now, it's like they're not. They're actually nice enough family. Even like she's just like a New York type artist, kind of like that they would have portrayed a lot of times in 80s movies.
Yeah.
And he's like this businessman, which you never really say what he does, but he just needs to de-stress.
He just wants to move to the country and have a nice quiet life with his wife and his daughter.
But they're nice, and even at the end where they summon Gina Davis and fucking what's his name? Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, which I'd forgotten it was him entirely, actually.
And they see that they're actually hurting. They get really upset. You know, they're like, stop it. You know, your man Odo, that they, like, he's like, I don't know how to, you know, they didn't have malicious intent, and they're not like the bad guys in it.
Yeah, they just said they kind of thought it'd be cool to have ghosts like that. They could actually, you know, have a haunted house
and
kind
as well,
of theme.
In fairness, they did buy the house, so they're entitled to do whatever they want. It's not like they're these evil people that are like just after, you know.
Yeah, it's not like they could. That's the thing. I mean, like, if you look at it from the other point of view, most exorcism possessions, you know, sort of poltergeist type films, their family are kind of like, oh, we're being run out of our own home by ghosts, and like this is just kind of a, you always feel for them. Yeah, it flips it on his head, whereas like the poor poltergeist are
Beetlejuice is a bioexorcist.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. But you know what I mean? It's just, if you look at it from another perspective, they're just...
It's a very, very, very smart movie. There's a lot of different bits in it. It's a comedy, it's a horror, and even like stuff...
It's very slapstick as well, which would appeal to kids, you know?
Yeah. But even like after they die, and then there's they find like a booklet telling
the handbook for the recently
deceased.
Yeah.
And it's done, and you don't really see too much of it anymore. I think in the 80s it must have been like What Happens. There's always this throwback to stuff 30 years ago. And in the 80s, I think there must have been, but we probably didn't realise that there was probably a throwback to the 50s, because it's that style of illustration on it, that kind of book, nearly like the Jetsons.
Yeah.
Look, I can't. There's a famous artist that used to draw like that, that did a lot of cartoons and stuff from that era. And if you see like automobile ads, like for Ford from that, from the 50s, it was all done in that style.
They're futuristic kind of ads and all the rest.
So, you know, it was very smart. I think the way there was that kind of retro kind of feel to it. See what I did there? Or hear what I did there. But when they go to the afterlife with it, I didn't pick up on it when I was younger as well, where it was like all the people that were working in these civil servant jobs were after killing themselves. So it was like punishment in the afterlife. Yeah.
And they were all sort of they're all kind of dreary. A lot of them, they're all kind of dreary, like flattened, deflated characters that were actually like pegged up on lines because they weren't even able to walk anymore. And just that kind of reminds you of the civil service. Is like, you know, sort of they've no legs, they can't support themselves. They're just like fucking these. They're just basically being wheeled from one place to another, like with no free will of their own, just drones, I suppose. Really, you know? Well, which is you know, that's always a stereotype. Yeah.
Well, it's just the whole the construction of the whole thing with the afterlife. And as well, I don't know if you picked up on it. There's a whole thing for people who haven't seen. If you haven't seen Beetlejuice, like I don't know. Yeah.
Where have you been?
But when they're in their own house, the Maitlands, the family that got killed when they're ghosts, they can't actually leave the house, and apparently they have to stay there for 125 years or something like that. But when they do step outside, they get transported to Saturn, and there's like these sandworms that attack them. But they only briefly mention that in the movie, and I didn't pick up on it the first time, right? So you think it's this like purgatory or after, you know? It's just all very, very odd. I think in the cartoon, because there's a cartoon of Beetlejuice that went on for ages.
And the sandworms are like huge in it.
Yeah, but they mention, I'm fairly sure they mentioned that at Saturn quite a lot. But it's just such an unusual thing, you know, where it's like...
Why Saturn?
Yeah. So Tim Burton, if you're listening, why Saturn?
Yes, why indeed. Yes, exactly. But of course, as well, you have the whole sort of the emergence of the Tim Burton style, where you have like these sort of outrageous like characters, over the top characters. Winona Ryder looks like Helena Bonham Carter.
Basically nearly every character that he did, or every film he did, there was always a certain kind of character, and
or it's just like this very sort of not woe is me, but just a very depressed.
It's Disney got.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's for people who might know. Tim Burton worked for Disney for a long time. He was an animator there, and then he wanted to move into that's why I think people probably thought he kind of seemed to nearly come out of nowhere. He was after I think it was Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Pee-wee Herman. He was after doing before this, wasn't it? And then he did Beetlejuice, and then Batman straight away after that. And,
so it was a very stratospheric kind of a rise. But again, it's just, like, I mean, that was the thing. You kind of, Jesus, I remember for years there was people who were just into the Tim Burton aesthetic because it was a very defined aesthetic. Like, I mean, even the Sandworms, you kind of look at them as they've got that black and white kind of stripe thing going on.
I was saying that too. It was when I was in our college, someone said it to me. They were like, "Oh, your stuff always reminds me of Beetlejuice," and I was like, "What?" And then I was looking at it, and I was like, "Oh my god!" You don't
realize a lot of black and white stripes.
You don't realize how much of an impact certain things have on you when you're a kid, like, and it just fucking sticks in. But Tim Burton, he still is obviously massive. He's a very important director. I don't think he gets enough credit for the cultural impact he's after having.
Yeah, see, I think it happens the whole time. If somebody becomes like too big, people suddenly go, "Oh God, I'm not interested in this anymore." And I can actually remember when I went to college for film studies, and there was like somebody actually did their whole thesis on, like, sort of the art and the look of Tim Burton kind of thing, the stylings of Tim Burton, and it was that big at the time as well. That was like whole sort of debates were kind of generated around it, and people were looking at the impact of them on cinema and on art in general.
Well, it's very unusual.
And then after it just seemed to sort of people after I think The Nightmare Before Christmas, people were just like, "I'm done with him now." Kind of thing. It seemed to have
Nightmare
this
Before
weird...
Christmas is still massive though.
Yeah,
it has
no, that's a huge cult following. But after that, I think everything seemed to tail off a little bit.
I think it was a big whale or something like that. I never actually saw it myself, but I think it was around that time people started kind of drifting away from. Although I think people were probably growing up, you had people that were like goth kids that were into, and as well it is, I don't know, it's like everyone has their day with stuff. Like Tim Burton, I can't think of any film that I've seen of his that I would consider bad.
Yeah.
Not that I haven't seen all of them, but like, I mean, it varied. Well, like the Mars Attack, I think is fucking a real underrated in the film. At the time, it was it's just so stupid and so funny.
And again, it's got that so weird slapstick kind of thing. It's got this sort of it's like real life cartoons or something like that. That's the way I kind of, the action.
I think that's it with a lot of these. Like, I mean, I think he started getting a lot of attention. Well, it's like Batman anyway, but like Edward Scissorhands.
Yeah.
Hands. I think he became synonymous with, it was that thing with Johnny Depp and working with Johnny Depp, and as well Helena Bonham Carter. Was Helena Bonham Carter in Edward Scissorhands? I've only ever seen Edward Scissorhands once.
No, it was Winona Ryder was in Edward Scissorhands.
Oh, was she as well? Yeah. But there was that kind of there was always the freak, for lack of a better word, or the outsider that he focused on with stuff, and he probably still does. I haven't seen a Tim Burton movie in quite a long time.
See, that's the thing. It seems to have sort of I suppose the furore has kind of settled down a little bit, because at one stage it just seemed like everywhere you looked there was like a Tim Burton film, or there was Tim Burton inspired, or Tim Burton art style and all this kind of stuff, because it was huge for quite a long time there.
Oh, it's one of these movies that I really liked was the one on Ed Wood.
Yeah.
I wasn't familiar with Ed Wood, and then I remember seeing the thing that there was, like, when we were growing up, Sky is a massive kind of thing now, but it was a new TV channel, and it had kind of shit stuff on it at first.
Terrestrial satellite.
Yeah, and there was like a rip-off of Elvira used to be on, I think it was on a Friday night, and it used to have stuff like Plan 9 from Outer Space and all those. I remember seeing those movies on. They are terrible, like. Yeah. But they do have a certain charm. And it was just, then when I saw Ed Wood and I saw these, it was like, oh, and he did a fantastic job in like humanizing and maybe bringing to the forefront this person that was nearly kind of like seen as a joker. A lot of people are considered the worst director ever. And you can see, this guy was full of passion. He was actually really creative. He didn't have any money. He was working outside of the whole system.
Yeah, trying to film at night on a film set when they weren't being used by the studios during the day. He kind
of started guerrilla filmmaking, and there was a lot of different bits and pieces that he did. But you know, he managed to bring that person up. I think it might have got nominated for Oscars as well.
But that's, you know, I'd even forgotten he directed Sleepy Hollow, and that came out when I would have been like not quite a child, but it still kind of freaked the head off me because of what's his face?
Christopher.
Yeah, well, with these weird pointy teeth, like that was creepy as fuck, and it wasn't like, I mean, it wasn't overly violent, it wasn't. Do you know what I mean? Gory or like that, but it was still creepy as all hell. Like, you know?
It was. It's a very good film as well. I think it probably holds
looking at
up
the
a lot
year
better.
it was released, actually 1999. I would have well been an, you know, sort of a grown person at that stage, you know, but it still creeped me out. You know, to the extent that, like, you know, sort of the Headless Horseman and all the rest of it, so I still go, ugh.
But you look at Beetlejuice. There's some stuff in Beetlejuice that is
Pretty
quite
horrific.
scary.
Yeah.
Especially when you're a child. Like the bit when Beetlejuice kind of really goes full throttle and he turns into a snake and all that stuff. Where it looks like he's going to kill.
Yeah, it is quite terrifying. Like,
and he's a fucking horrific pervert as well.
Oh yeah, like I mean, he wants to marry like Winona Ryder's character, and she's a child.
But he's grabbing like Gina Davis by the, or trying to grab her by the snatcher, you know, and all this fucking shit.
And sure, how they end up like placating him for a while is like they basically build a whorehouse in the little the model sort of town by the graveyard, and he's like, well, I'll go in here for a while.
But he's a horrible character.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it was the cartoon probably.
Yeah, I think that maybe kind of change your perspective on it a bit, or you're remembering it as sort of like, oh, he was just, you know, a wacky, funny guy. He wasn't. He was horrible.
He was horrible, yeah. Michael Keaton did a great job on him. Apparently, I was looking at the thing about the making of it, and they were saying that people didn't think Michael Keaton should have been doing the same thing as people didn't think Michael Keaton should have been doing Batman. I think Michael Keaton was very underrated for a long time. And sure, he won an Oscar, didn't he, for that Birdman thing?
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, there is a new resurgence of Michael Keaton in films nowadays. There is, you've seen it, you know, remember White Noise?
Yeah.
That's a fucking amazing movie. I remember seeing that in the cinema. Not really knowing anything about it, just that Michael Keaton was in it. And being it got torn apart, I think, when it came out.
But that's what a lot of these films did, even though like he plays his character so well. I don't know if you recall a film called Pacific Heights. Basically,
I do.
He moves in as a tenant, and he becomes increasingly more weird and fucking more dangerous and all the rest. And the couple are like,
it's Kurt Russell in that.
I think it could have been actually. It's like, how do we get this psycho out of our house? Like, oh my god! But I remember absolutely loving that film when it came out, and everyone was like, oh, it's a piece of shit.
But this is the thing about Michael Keaton. He's very versatile.
Yeah.
But is with the whole he's real talented, and like I mean the whole thing with Beetlejuice. Apparently, he had lived an awful lot of stuff in it. They just left him off to do, and the big lines like it's showtime and all that was just him going on it. So this is the thing with Tim Burton as well. I think Tim Burton is probably one of these like, you know, there's something like Quentin Tarantino is great at spotting talent, but Quentin Tarantino's trick was getting like old talent that was kind of forgotten about
previously, sort of big and falling a little bit.
Whereas Burton, I think, was very good at picking up on these people that were,
and he seemed to get a lot of people on his own wavelength as well. Sure, I mean, he worked with Johnny Depp for such a long time, and it almost seemed like the two of them were just like the same person at one stage.
Yeah, like know? I mean, we're looking at like lists of these. I'm sure. I think did he? Yeah, so maybe he produced the Addams Family. Or something, but he definitely had something to do with the Addams Family, didn't he? And there was the whole thing with the Addams Family. What's that thing?
Well, he did. It was Dark Shadows, wasn't it? Which was sort of like the kind of soap opera type thing. Do you remember
there was that film, but it's just there was, because it's on Netflix. Yeah, Wednesday. That thing. Yeah, he did. He did. He had stuff to do with the Addams Family. But you know that all those kind of things around that time, they had that kind of Burton feel around them. But when you look at the list of these movies, like I mean, guaranteed it's a lot, but it's not like a ton really over a 40-year period.
Yeah, I see. Oh God, my God, is it 40? It is 40. Yeah. Jesus Christ, oh my God.
But the thing is,
just having an existential crisis over here. Oh my God.
They're all good movies, you know.
For the most part,
I think the only one that probably got really shit on was the remake, or was at the time was the reimagining of Planet of the Apes, and that was the start of the reimaginings.
And that was all right, as far as I remember, as well.
Yeah, I think it was because Mark Wahlberg was in it, and it was the time when Mark Wahlberg was kind of transitioning into being an actor, and a lot of people were still like, how are you? A serious actor, but as well because it was like called a reimagine. I think people were ready just to go for it regardless. of what it was like. But yeah, it's by no means a bad movie at all. But this is the thing, like we say with stuff a lot of time, like people forget that films are subjective. They're a form of art, so you might think it's a piece of shit, but someone else will probably really, really, really like it.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, like even Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I didn't particularly like Tim Burton's version of it.
Oh, you saw it on the cinema with your dad, didn't it?
Possibly.
Or maybe it was Alice in Wonderland, I think. I remember you going in with your dad to one of those.
Yes, but no, actually I think it might have been a Scrooge or something like, I don't know, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I just didn't like the way that Johnny Depp played the character, but that's because my Willy Wonka is Gene Wilder, and that's the one I grew up with, and I can't picture anybody else in that role bar Gene Wilder. But I mean, to kids that are watching Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Tim Burton's version for the first time,
I've never seen it.
Oh my God, you know.
I didn't look at it. I wouldn't be something that I would really have any interest in at all. Sweeney Todd, did we see that?
Yep. That was quite good as well. I really enjoyed that. I love the way you just got silent.
I'm just looking at it. It's terrible. Yeah, great podcast material. I'm just looking at the list, kind of going, there's a lot of movies I haven't seen, actually. I think probably up to Planet of the Apes. There's kind of like, I haven't really looked at anything at it. But Beetlejuice.
Yeah. Beetlejuice. Don't say it too often there now. Don't wear out his name. But I mean, as you said, even there's the slight tinges of horror, but it's kind of cartoony as well, because when they go to the afterlife, the waiting room of the afterlife, you see the other people that are waiting there, and it's like, they're sort of like this girl that's after being cut in half and her legs are separate to her torso, and it's just played off as this comedy thing where she can cross her legs independently of her body.
But that's the thing, even with the like that they don't get into, they don't mention. I think maybe they do mention at one stage, very briefly, someone was reading through the book for the recently deceased and said something like, it's like, if you kill yourself you end up working in civil service or something. But it's very, off the cuff, so you have to rewatch the film, I think, to probably pick up on it. Or maybe if you're fucking like,
if you just actually pay
more attention,
rather than us two do it.
But stuff like, there was the receptionist in it. Like, I didn't pick up on it until we were looking at there. When she opens up, thing, you see she slashed her wrists.
And sure, their social worker, I suppose, if you want to call it that. She slit throat. But it's not done in a horrific fashion. It's just, you can see there's a shadow or a weird gash on her neck, and it's just like, well, okay, that's how she's,
I don't know why. This time around, looking at it, she fucking cracked me up. She's a really old woman. She's like been in a fucking million things. But there's a scene in it where there's a bunch of football players are after dying at a thing, and they don't realise that but they keep calling her coach.
Yeah, they're like, what do we do now, coach? What happens?
I don't know why, but I was just inside, I was fucking like, I really struggling not to laugh. It was just, I don't know, the way sometimes there's certain
just
things.
Hits her funny bone.
Yeah, and it was just ridiculous. There's a lot of ridiculous bits in it.
Yeah. Which I think the thing that I always end up fucking cackling about is there's the lad that got his head shrunk, and it's just his head is so ridiculous, and he just looks so terrified in the big eyes. And then you look over, and there's also like the witch doctor
shrunk his head. And you don't really it's just, and like how much of a shit Beetlejuice is, like at the end scene where he's there and he's got his ticket is like 5 million or something like that, and your man, the head shrinker, is like number 4, and he just takes it on.
Yeah, he's like, you can wait for another charity here,
But it's, I did just with the head as well. It's the special effects. Yeah. The special effects have not dated that badly
at
for
all.
A film that's over
Obviously,
30
a lot of
years
it is done. It's like a sort of real special effects as opposed to CGI.
But the thing is as well, there was that charm to it where they're not. You don't look at it and go, "Oh, that looks real." Even at the time, you don't. That's not meant to be the point. The point is meant to be that it's
over the top and hilarious and weird and sort of a bit creepy but funny at the same time.
Like the sandworms, they're done that Harryhausen style, but they're deliberately done.
It's almost like stop motion.
And as well, just some of the stuff with Beetlejuice, but then when they do the horrific stuff, like with the Matlins, when they do the thing like stretching their faces and all that shit, or cutting heads off, they're actually really, really good effects. They're
kind of believable, but that's the thing as well. They are kind of very comedic looking, which takes away from the horrors. One of them stretches their mouth entirely open, and their eyeballs and their tongue are hanging out of their mouth, kind of a thing.
I think what works really is Gina Davis. It's the horror look It's all because there's something always kind of very wholesome.
That's what I was going to say. She's very innocent and very sort of naive, I suppose, is probably the best word. But yeah, she's always very like, golly gee, kind of a thing. Yeah. She's a bit like sort of who am I thinking of? Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. She's got that kind of vibe about her. She's like, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, kind of a thing.
But like even the bit where she was after cutting Alec Baldwin's head off and she was holding it with a knife in her hand and she's kind of got her face kind of grimaced.
Yeah.
But it looks like it's hard to say. It looks like it's someone who's just trying to grimace as opposed to, this is the whole, like we're only saying it as well. Like Gina Davis at that stage in her career was fucking massive.
Huge.
She was, I'm fairly sure, like, not that the Oscars are to be like, but like, I'm fairly sure she got nominated if she didn't win an Oscar for Thelma and Louise and stuff. But like, she was in some great fucking things. And as well, like, she was in the good reboot of The Exorcist, the TV show. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, I don't want to spoil it who she plays in it, but she is fucking fantastic in that. Like, she was just a really, really good, solid actor that it seemed her career just kind of stalled or something, like, it was really weird. Like, I don't know why.
It seems she went on a huge big high trajectory and then it just like she vanished for a while or something. Now of course I know if we actually went looking her up, which we probably should have done, I didn't know she's working steadily away, like, but
it is, I think it happens to women actors more so.
You hit a certain age, don't you? And all of a sudden you're playing the granny and the sort of the stepmother and stuff like that.
Or like you have The Rock can continue being The Rock for fucking however long, but like or people can be versatile or whatever. But Tom Cruise, although Tom Cruise I think is a real anomaly now. Whereas like at the time it was like Tom Cruise, say fucking Bruce Willis, all these guys, Arnold Schwarzenegger,
for the everyman kind of thing.
These people were just leading men, and it was like they're going to go on and on forever and stuff. But you never really had that with women, which I think is a bit bizarre.
Yeah, but I mean, it's always said that, like, there's no room in Hollywood for women over a certain age. Like once you're past like 30, even.
Well, it's shocking. Like
it is, but that's what I mean. You go from being sort of not quite the main character, but the main character's wife or girlfriend or love interest, and all of a sudden you're like, as I said, you're like their mother, their grandmother, their stepmother, or you're some supporting character. You're like the weird old woman. You're like an agent for an actor. You're always this quirky sort of side supporting character. You're never sort of the leading lady again in your own right, even though there's loads of, like, say, a George Clooney who was like, the older guy, and he can still get women that are like 30 years younger than him, kind of.
Well, he's someone as well I think is after falling off. I can't, like, I know he's consistently in films, but
a reference point, you know what I mean? But it's, you always have that whole thing where like men can like play the leading man until they're 50, 60. Look at Sean Connery, like, Jesus, he was still like leading man, getting women who were like young enough to be his granddaughter, never mind his daughter, kind of a thing.
But that's because he just gave him a little slap.
Indeed, surely. But yes, that's, I suppose, I don't know, why we'll have to figure out.
But Gina Davis, she's fantastic in it. Alec Baldwin is actually, he's Alec Baldwin in it, but she's actually an awful lot better.
Yeah, he's not the kind of the wisecracking sort of world weary sort of Alec Baldwin that you kind of are used to from him being an older gent and in the likes of 30 Rock and all that kind of stuff. He's kind of a bit of a klutz.
It was when he was like going into leading man areas, like with such hits as The Shadow and
yes, exactly. But he just played this kind of it was a bit of a doofus kind of a thing, he was just bumbling around a bit, and she was sort of, the wife was the one that was trying to, we need to scare these people out, we need to get our house back, kind of thing. She was the driving force nearly behind the whole thing. Well,
it's they're probably in it the most, but like the people who you remember the most are like obviously Beetlejuice, but fucking Winona Ryder's character, when you look back at it, it's like she's not in it a whole lot. She's in it for a bit, but she stood, you kind of think of her as being one of the main characters, which she is one of the main characters in it. But like, I mean, that was like the world got introduced to Winona Ryder. And it's great that like she had a comeback with Stranger Things as well, because Winona Ryder was always like just fucking an amazing actor in a lot of unusual things as well, that she did stuff that you kind of go fucking, that wouldn't have worked for other people's career. She didn't go into the Hollywood fucking system.
No, she
really,
went very ballsy, I think, as well. She took a lot of roles that wouldn't be, as you said, your typical, sort of leading lady kind of trajectory or anything like that, which she could have done. It wasn't that she was, it was always that you're the sort of the main character's friend if you're a bit quirky looking, and you're the main character if you're good looking. She was like main character good looking.
Oh, she was, stuff like Heathers. She was like fucking, it was. Because I can't remember exactly, but I think there was a lot of trouble with Heathers coming out at first, and I think they ended up toning it down an awful lot. Jeez, at the end, Christian Slater is going to fucking blow himself up.
Yeah.
And they're killing people like in high school, which I'd imagine if they try, they did try to remake it there.
That's I know nowadays it wouldn't really fly, would it?
Yeah. But then her career kind of went and then she came back with A Scanner Darkly.
Yeah.
And it was like fucking. That's a really fucking underrated film at all.
Yeah.
Although I can understand because it is kind of complicated. It's a good sci-fi film, but
and I think as well the whole sort of the way it's shot as well. I think maybe puts a lot of people off as well. Yeah.
Well, I think it's just the thing as well because it's just A Scanner really Darkly unusual, and like Keanu Reeves, another fucking massively underrated actor, and at that stage as well, all these people they were seen as they can't act.
Yeah, and it was all part of not quite the Hollywood Brat Pack, but kind of a little bit. It was like, here comes Keanu Reeves, like plank of wood, he can't act. The man can act, like he wouldn't be consistently hired though.
But they also said that about Brad Pitt as well. Yeah. I think it was just that people were like, these people come along, they're not like Richard Harris, or they're not fucking kind of like, I don't know why I said Richard Harris. Yeah, yes, I know. They're not thespians, or they're not like not John.
Brian Blessed.
And like, I mean, they're more relatable. They're
exactly. They can actually lose themselves into it and be believable, and people will relate to them going, that seems like, could happen to me.
Because Keanu Reeves wasn't like that. Whoa, dude. That these fucking people just associated with Bill and Ted.
Yeah, one character.
And like, he got a lot of shit as well for Dracula. I really liked him in that. Now, guaranteed as well, I read the Mike Mignola's comic book version of the film before I saw the film, and I just had it. I don't know, because he's depicted so well in it. Like, that comic book is fucking amazing. But like, I really like Keanu Reeves as Jonathan Harker, because you never get a sense that Jonathan Harker is this fucking brain surgeon anyway.
Yeah.
In the thing, and he's just this guy he's like a little bit innocent and a little bit easily led, and then he's like, all right, I'll stay here.
Well, that's, you see, I think it was just easy at the time. Like, film critics are always looking for sort of like, the big headline or the the one soundbite, and it was always easy to just go, whoa, dude, that kind of thing. It's like, this is this guy like going whoa with Dracula, and it's like, no, actually, if you watch the film, it wasn't really. It's just it's very easy to just throw that kind of same slag.
It's even with The Matrix. Like, I mean, the thing is, Keanu Reeves is someone I think has been like constantly proving critics wrong. And John Wick, and even like The Matrix Resurrections, he was really good in that. It was a Resurrection, the last one, part 4.
Revolutions.
No, that was part 3.
Oh, sorry, right. Okay.
I can't remember what the new one. It was Resurrection or something like that. But it's just. I don't know. It's just,
I don't know where you're going with this.
Well, this is the weird thing. I know he's not in this movie, but like with Winona Ryder as well, that like Tim Burton obviously saw something in her. With it, and like, I mean, who would it, like, she went on to be massive through the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah, sure. She was on the cover of every magazine when she, in the 90s and stuff. She was at every party that was going. It was just like everywhere you looked, Winona Ryder was there.
I don't think she went down the Drew Barrymore route of kind of cocaine and stuff.
Well, didn't she have that whole shoplifting allegation and all that?
That was when her career started.
Kind of stalled a bit,
And like, I mean, I can remember that in all the magazines and stuff, because it's sure, this is fucking the way people are. They're always eager to fucking tear
exactly. There's a bit of gossip and it's negative. Let's report on it. Like, and
I can't remember if she actually did but if she was, I'm sure it was some mental health kind of thing at the time, because like fucking people in that situation, they're not really supported in any.
Yeah, and the pressure you get put under constant scrutiny and all this, because that was the thing. Like, I mean, it's bad enough nowadays in social media, but everyone is on social media, so people are kind of used to having their photographs available online. But back then it was like she was in every magazine and she was on every stupid fucking MTV news slot or something like that. Yeah. I was like, it must be very hard to deal with that level of intrusion.
Going up and never having a minute,
That's it. You can't, you can't literally nowadays. You can't go anywhere anyway without being filmed. But back then it was like you couldn't even sit and have a cup of coffee without paparazzi papping you or something like that.
And I think the whole Hollywood system, I don't know if it probably hasn't changed at all, but it was quite predatory towards younger people anyway. And they didn't give a shit. It was just people were turning up. It's kind of funny just because it's narrated by him, but Corey Feldman's choreography, I think it's called, is actually quite a good read. Or I listened to it I was in hospital last year and I listened to it over a day. And it's actually really good, but it's shocking the shit. And I don't think he's lying, and I don't think he's kind of adding legs on things. It all just rings too true. And I don't see what the guy would have to gain from fucking
still hammering on about that this many years later, because it's more damaging to his career.
Yeah, he doesn't play the victim in it. Yeah. This is the thing about for people laugh at him, and it's
okay, his music career is a bit. It's what he enjoys.
He's after doing some catchy songs, and that's just what he's into.
And it's just because it's a certain look or a certain style that has maybe fallen out of favour, I suppose, in recent years.
People, I think you have it with happened with Macaulay Culkin and what's the kid that was in fucking
Sixth Sense.
Yeah. Haley Joel Osment. Yeah. Where people try and freeze frame you as a fucking an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old,
and don't allow you to be an adult,
and with Corey Feldman, there was some fucking horrendous shit that happened to that man over his life, and because of his family as well, his mother was just. And they all just exploited him, really. But I can imagine that that's a lot of people that don't talk about their experiences probably had similar fucking kind of experiences as well in the Hollywood system, unless they were kind of fortunate enough to kind of
have a really strong system around them, protective system.
Look at Britney Spears, she just got fucking destroyed, really. And then when she was having a mental breakdown,
everyone was just like, oh look, she's shaving her head, and I was like, Jesus Christ, somebody intervene with this poor girl.
Yeah, it was
clearly she's not having a good time.
They were just like, oh yeah, because it was the way she was portrayed as being this kind of Christian kind of
schoolgirl kind
all
of thing,
American girl, and they're all looking at it, and it's like, fucking hell, this is. I remember at the time being obviously it wasn't following Britney Spears' career, but she couldn't help but
it was in every magazine. That's the thing, it was in newspapers and magazines. It was reported on MTV News, all of that kind of stuff. You just couldn't get away from it,
And then, it was probably 15, I don't know, 10 years, maybe 20 years later, I don't know, when the whole stuff started coming out about the thing with her father kind of having control over finances.
Oh yeah, not guardianship, I can't think of the name, the particular word, but yeah.
But with all that, and then people were free Britney, or kind of really, a lot, now people are but...
Well, you see, that's because people are a lot more understanding of mental health and a little bit more open and nuanced and read into things, whereas before, there was a real weird culture in the sort of the late 90s, early 2000s, where it was just not the whole lag culture, but a bit like that, where it's just oh yeah, let's just laugh at everyone, let's get upskirts, and it's it was just a bit sleazy, I think that
it was thing, for people that are outside of Ireland or England, they would remember Loaded and FHM and all that. I don't know if they were over in America, but they were called lads mags, where it was just all this kind of laddish behaviour, where it's tits and beer and football and stuff,
and let's laugh at women a bit. But I don't know how we got on to talk about that. But I suppose bringing it back to that,
Tim Burton wouldn't have read Loaded.
But again, I'm just looking at it with sort of eyes kind of removed from the late 80s and all the rest, and as an adult you're looking at it, and it is so creepy that Beetlejuice wants to marry Lydia, and everyone is kind of rolling with it. They're kind of oh
no, they're not.
No, but I mean it's just she's there, and she's it's kind of oh well, if you marry me, I'll I won't kill all these people, and she's even herself, she's kind of I guess so kind of thing. It's it's just resigned to your fate. I don't mean rolling with this is all enthusiastic, but just this is a normal thing for a a weird undead semi-demon to do, like, you know.
Gina Davis' character was like, we can't let that girl be alone with that pervert.
I know.
Before he even starts kind of going on about, you know,
I know, but to have it be the central premise that he just wants to marry this young
child
girl, you know, it's just, and still he's seen as like this, like, oh, he's so funny and all the rest, but I think it's because of the overtop actions and the mannerisms and all the rest.
Well, I think as well because there's probably a bunch of kids looking at it, so when you're a kid,
you don't see like how disastrously horribly wrong this is that a grown man wants to like marry
it's just seen as like a bit of a story kind of.
Yeah, it's kind of your, like, I mean, kids play act of being married, or, you know, let's play houses and all that kind of stuff. So I suppose looking at it from a childhood kind of perspective, it would be a little bit more innocent than looking at it from an adult perspective. You're like, whoa,
whereas
that's
like, oh, he's a child molester.
Yeah.
But then saying that, we talked about it, or maybe did we talk about the whole thing about with Freddy Krueger, where Freddy Krueger went from, in the first one, he was a child molester and a child murderer.
Yeah.
So then it was like, he was just a killer of children, and I was like, oh, that's all right, that's not
that's not as bad.
Whereas at least he's not, we can have him as a hero now.
Yes, he only kills children, he doesn't actually molest them, so that's all good and fine and dandy.
Whereas I thought that if they had to go with in the remake that they did with what he played Rorschach in the thing, but he ended up looking like a fucking a chocolate fucking button, melted. Where they were going to do it originally, where it was like he was falsely accused and the parents killed an innocent man. He wasn't after doing that, and the real killer got caught later on, or it turned out that the kids were making it up. So he was like getting revenge. Then you kind of went, yeah, fucking, you know, he's justified in his revenge.
Speaking of child molesters, do I have it right in, you know, the father in this? Didn't he have some terrible accusations levelled at him as well? He kind of ruined not just his career, but quite a lot of lives and all the rest. So.
Well, Jeffrey Jones, he was in a load of things. He wasn't. He was.
I know he went on to do Deadwood or something like that, I think, anyway, as well. But
I think he was the.
He had criminal offences. Yeah, that was what it was. I do remember
possession of child pornography and soliciting a 14. This is off Wikipedia now. And soliciting a 14-year-old
I don't necessarily
sexually explicit.
Want to get into it too much, but it is just, you know, he was the principal in Ferris Bueller, and he was seen as this comedy actor, and then this like dark kind of thing comes out about it, and it's just like, whoa, creepy.
No, the charges were dropped. He got 5 years probation though and stuff. He was arrested a few times after that thing as well.
That's it.
He was in Howard the Duck as well, and I remember he was really creepy in that. I remember I never really liked him. After, I think that might have been one of the first films I saw him in. I remember seeing that in the cinema. Actually, we must do Howard the Duck at some stage. And there just always was.
Yeah. But that's, you see, I would have loved Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and I would have thought he was hilarious as the principal, because, you know, it's that whole, again, it's looking at it from the child's point of view, where it's like the dean he's just getting so frustrated at like this kid, like, you know, kind of getting one over on him and everything, and he's just so annoyed, and everything goes so badly wrong from him, you know, sort of falling over fences, getting attacked by dogs and all that kind of thing, like, oh yes, and
take that, Dean.
Exactly, yeah, but that's, you know, it's all set up like that. But then I remember when I heard about this, I was like, oh, yikes. Big yikes. But yes, anyway, sorry, back to, we keep on going off on huge tangents here, back to Beetlejuice.
Yeah, well, I suppose we were kind of saying Beetlejuice basically like a paedophile, although maybe Beetlejuice is just kind of like simple or something like that, and doesn't realise
what marriage is. He just wants to hold hands
or
with
how old she is. Maybe there's some kind of thing in the ghost realm.
He's invisible to
and maybe Lydia is actually a lot older than...
Then we give her... we kind of think or something.
Maybe she was like... Or maybe in that state, kind of like child marriage is legal.
Yeah. Let's get away from the whole child marriage thing, I suppose. But another thing I suppose I thought was quite hilarious was Catherine O'Hara's character. Because it's basically... It's the same character as, like, you know... Schitt's Creek, except when she was like a younger woman. It's bizarre how it's carried through. She is very, very good in it. She's hilarious, and it's like the over-the-top outfits and like, you know, oh, I'm creating my art, and it's just like so bizarre.
I bet you didn't notice there's one bit in it where they have a shot where it's like the father is upstairs in a Christmas jumper and he's sitting around doing stuff, and then it goes to the next day and she's wearing a mad pair of red pants where she's cooking stuff in the kitchen.
Oh, what were they? The repurposed jumper?
It was his jumper, yeah. She's wearing it. So, you know, there's weird little bits and pieces in it like that, which I think is very much like the mother in Schitt's Creek. With that. But she is great. Like, I mean, it was only after, because, like, I always had it in my head about her being, like, the mother out of Home Alone. And you kind of forgot about her in, like, stuff like Best in Show and all, you know.
She's a fantastic comedic actor.
Yeah.
You know, it's just unbelievable. And it kind of played so well because she was such a horrible character but still likeable.
Yeah.
But, you know, horrible in that sort of, like, you know, she's totally removed from the normality of everyday life, and, you know, they've managed to ignore their daughter to the point where the daughter is, like, wanting to commit suicide as such. She wants to become undead just to get away from her horrible, drab, boring life.
Well, the thing is, I was looking at, so, like, say we'd be Gen X. And, like,
very tail of Gen X.
Yeah.
We're more or less Zennials.
But all that would be like the Gen X stuff. Like, say, Lydia would have been a Gen Xer.
Absolutely, just you know, sort of very self-sufficient and ignored by her parents kind of a thing, and just get on with things.
It's where they used to be called, over in America, they used to call them latchkey kids.
Yeah.
And she would have been very much, where it was that thing where it was like all... Like, I mean, I suppose we could have had it to a certain extent. It was the kind of thing where kids were left to do.
Yeah. Off to your own devices, basically. It's just like, whatever, it's like, okay, we've gotten you past the age of, like, 6, off you go, do whatever you want, and just come home by 10, you know, sort of be home before it's dark. And
as well over in America as well, like, I mean, it wouldn't have been saying in Ireland because divorce was illegal in Ireland up until kind of like a while ago, but you had a lot of people separating.
And two households as well, like, you know, so, and the kid was kind of bouncing between the two houses and not really sort of fitting in anywhere.
Yeah, so you see that in a lot of movies in the 80s, where it's, I suppose it's the thing looking back on it from a historical point of view now, where it's a good, very, very good depiction of what like life would have been like for a lot of people in the 80s, with that thing with the stepmother. Or the stepfather.
All of these, like, blended families that, you know, and didn't quite blend successfully enough that the kid felt, you know, sort of, and that was always the premise as well. The kid is like two homes but not really at home anywhere.
As well, you had this big psychological movement going on at the time where it was about loving yourself and kind of looking after yourself, and, you know, where it was nearly... You forget about other people. It was a very selfish kind of thing.
It was always like the me thing, you know. It was like greed is good, you know, that whole 80s thing as well, you know. I'm like, all right, I've got mine.
Yeah, you had your kids that let them off to do, you know, they shouldn't be dominating your life. You know, it was very, very...
to live my life kind of a thing,
and a lot of those movies, whereas I think you have the Spielberg...
the really wholesome thing.
Yeah, but Spielberg always got, like, in a lot of Spielberg's movies, you'll see that it's like, say, families dealing with financial difficulties, which was the thing as well, that there was a big fucking depression in the 80s as well, globally nearly, but over in America as well. Like the Goonies, it starts off people are losing their house, and there's a lot of that, and where someone's losing a house or they can't afford to pay something, so people enter into competition, or they get caught up in some adventure to try and get some money for it, like, and then you have it like with the Tim Burton kind of thing more so, and like in a weird way David Fincher nearly carries on that tradition, like with Fight Club, where it's like, well, these are all these kids grown up now and they're men and they're fucking they're
still adrift, exactly,
because they never had really anyone to teach them how to be men or how to,
and then when they got out in the world there was nothing waiting there for him as well, you know. It was always like, go to college and study and you'll have a great job, and it's like, no, you'll end up working in some shitty fucking gas station or something like that, because that's all that's around.
Anything wrong with working,
but you know what I mean, like I know, but you know, everyone is promised great things. All you do is you come out with college debt and you go into a low paid job that you can't afford to pay your college debt.
I think it is in Fight Club that they say it isn't, oh, we're all told that we're going to be rock stars, and then it's like we're just like, what the fuck, like,
just out here pumping gas kind of thing. But that's, I mean, a lot of Tim Burton films are like that. I mean, this is actually a film that I was just only thinking today we should be covering at some stage. Is Edward Scissorhands. Is the ultimate, like, loner, you know. He's kind of shunned by everybody, and it's he trying to find his way in the world and just trying to find someone who will accept him, and he's obviously very different and all that. So that's a lot of the central themes I think of Burton's films.
He dies at the end of that, doesn't he?
I think so, yeah. No, we'll have to rewatch it. We'll have to rewatch it.
He doesn't. Surely there's a
Everyone
happy
dies.
ending. But that's the thing with the Burton's films as well. There's that Disney thing in it where it's dark Disney nearly, but there's a happy ending.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's Beetlejuice didn't get his bride, I suppose.
Yes, I know, yeah. Yes, well, I mean, the happy ending for Beetlejuice is they all decided to float around the house and sing.
But this is the thing as well. Even though Beetlejuice gets eaten by a sandworm, he still shows up at the, where it is a thing, and it's like, where's they're all dead? Like, isn't there? There's not.
You can't kill anyone deader than dead, like,
Yeah. So where it does have that kind of nice cartoonish quality to it, where it's like you can do anything to these people that they're just going to.
Yeah, they'll just be dead. The spirits, bigger.
Yeah. But I suppose that's it for this week. No. So I hope you enjoyed Beetlejuice. Yeah, I think we start planning out a little bit more ahead, and I think we might start saying it either on social media or saying it on the podcast for people that are listening about what we're going to do, so you can watch.
Watch ahead, exactly. Rather than like, surprise, motherfuckers, we've watched this.
See what you think about it afterwards. But as always, go over to our social media and Instagram. That's it. I was trying to think because I was going to do a newsletter and blog and things. Oh yeah, and our YouTube channel. We'll definitely start putting stuff on YouTube. We've been saying that for ages.
Yeah. And thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you very much for listening. And until next week, arrivederci.